Hello and welcome to this tutorial for a PDF hat pattern that I sell in my Etsy shop. You will get pattern pieces for 3 different sizes, and I'm just going to show you how to cut out the medium size 22.5 inch. Your pattern pieces will have more printing on them, but these are my test run pieces. You'll need to cut 6 out of the crown, 6 in lining, 4 ear flaps, 4 brim pieces, and 2 pieces of heavyweight buckram. Now I'm using double-sided adhesive buckram that's used for pelmet making, and I find it easier to actually draw around my pattern piece and then cut the buckram out because it is quite stiff and unwieldy. But I don't know what buckram or interfacing you'll be using, so if you've only got lightweight interfacing, use 2 pieces instead of 1. Now the first thing to do is take 2 pieces of the crown right sides together and stitch down one edge. I think I nearly knocked the camera over at this point. Still. So these are our first 2 pieces of the crown being stitched together. Once you've stitched them, trim the seam to about half its width. Now you can top stitch if you want to on this hat, and you would do that now. You would press open the seam and top stitch on the right side, but I'm not doing top stitching on this hat pattern at the moment. So I'm going to trim the seam to about half its width, and then I'm going to join the next piece to it. So I join a third piece. When you're lining them up, line them up from the bottom edges, because where you've trimmed, they may not match at the top. So line them up from the bottom edges when you're putting the crown pieces together. So we now stitch this side on. So we'll have 3 pieces joined together in total. And again, once you've stitched it, trim the seam. Now you join the other 3 pieces together in exactly the same way. So in effect, you'll end up with 2 halves of a hat. So you join the next 3 pieces together. And you'll see you've got 2 halves of a hat. We now put those right sides together and get the centre seams at the top matched up, and then sew them both together along that one long seam. If you've got fabric that really frays a lot, it might be ideal to just zigzag stitch or whatever along your edges before you put them together. But this fabric doesn't fray, so I'm quite happy. You can use tweeds, woolens, heavyweight cottons, corduroy, velvet, anything you like for this hat. Again, trim the seam. And do exactly the same with the lining. So 3 pieces together, exactly the same way you did the hat. Then the other 3 pieces, and then join those together. So in effect, you've got another hat, really. Next we take 2 of the ear flap pieces. And then we take our ribbon or cord or Petersham or whatever you're using for the top of the hat for the ribbon, and we cut it into half so that we've got a piece for each ear flap. I'm using tape here, cotton tape. You don't want it any wider than this, about 1 inch is your maximum width. You can go narrower, but don't go any wider. Find the middle of your earpiece and then lay your ribbon or tape over the top. Make sure it's in the middle. Now you need to either tack or stay stitch that ribbon just in place while you work on the ear flaps. Once you've got both of those stitched in place, you take the other sections of the ear flaps, right sides together again, put them over the top, and we're going to stitch these together. Be careful not to catch your tape in your seam as you go round. Then trim your seam again, and we shall turn these the right way round, and then we need to really press them. Again, if you were going to be top stitching, that's when you would top stitch these. So we have 1 ear flap there. So you do the same with both of them and press them so they're nice and flat. You should press as you go along with this project. I'm not really, just for saving time on videoing, because it does take a long time to do all this. Right, next, brim. 2 brim pieces. Because remember, you've got a brim at the front of the hat and a brim at the back. Put them right sides together and stitch the curved edge. And again, trim the seam. Oops, I've gone out of shot. That's not good, is it? Turn to the right side, press, carefully press. And then what you're going to do is put your buckram or your interfacing inside and iron that down inside of the brim piece. Now mine's double-sided, so it sticks both sides down very well, but if you haven't got that, you might want to stay stitch along the open edge. So now we have our crown, we have our 2 brims, and we have our ear pieces. Now be careful where you put the ear pieces. You want them opposite each side, and it's best to use just one whole segment and not have a seam down the middle. So that's where our earpiece is going to go, and it'll be stitched on that way round. So we stitch that first one on, and then we turn the hat round and stitch the other one on the opposite side. It should fit snugly between the seams of the crown sections. Next, the brim. Find the centre of your brim by folding it in half. Match that up with the centre seam there. And then each side of the brim should go round just to meet where your ear flaps are. And again, you're going to stitch that down. Now, as the brim is curved, you will have to ease it into position all the way around. So you stitch one brim on one side and the other brim on the other side. You can see me here attaching the second brim. That's the only fiddly bit really, attaching the brims. Then draw up the side, the earpieces, and tie them together at the top because we've now got to fix the lining on. Now your ribbons may be too long and need cutting and or hemming depending on what you're using. Take your lining and you're going to put right side of your lining to right side of hat. And you're going to tuck in the brim and the ear flaps and everything so you can sew the lining to the hat. Sorry, it's not very well photographed here. It'd be so helpful if I had someone to do it for me. Once your lining's all the way around, we're going to stitch it, but make sure you leave at least a 3-inch gap, probably one whole section, where you can turn the hat inside out. And I'm leaving a gap where I've got one of the ear flaps. So I'm going to leave a gap there and then stitch the rest round. Once it's stitched round, trim any bits and pieces that need cutting off, any thick areas. And we've now got to pull it through that gap that we left, which can be a bit of a struggle. So, as you'll see, it takes a while to do because you've got to get the brims, the ear flaps, the ribbon all pulled through that little hole. But it comes through eventually. I always think this bit's like magic. Ta-da! There we are, hat with a lining. All you need to do now is stitch down that opening where you've pulled the hat through. Now you can either stitch it on the sewing machine or you can do a slip stitch by hand. Check the length of your ribbons, cut them if needs be. So slip stitch your lining in. If you want to add a Petersham sweatband, that's entirely up to you. But you can press the hat because it's now all finished. So give it a good press. Cut any loose ends off. I'm terrible for that. And there we have it. Ta-da! Your Sherlock Holmes Deerstalker. I hope you have fun making this hat. Do let me know how you get on. If you need any help, just get in touch. Thanks ever so much. See you soon. Bye.